Welcome to this explainer. Close your eyes for just a second. I want you to picture a modern city at night. Behind thousands of identical windows, you're going to find the exact same stark reality. It's a glowing screen, illuminating a dark room, casting this pale light on a solitary face. It's a beautifully haunting image, but honestly, it's the defining paradox of our era. Today, we're exploring the silent architecture of digital loneliness. We're going to look really closely at the structural design features, literally the blueprints of our digital platforms that actually engineer modern isolation. Because this isn't just about, feeling a little disconnected. It's about how the very interfaces we rely on are quietly reshaping human belonging.
It's literally the question of our time, isn't it? Why have we never been more connected, both geographically and temporally, yet felt more utterly alone? I mean, we've got instant messaging, persistent social media streams, endless algorithmically curated feeds. Theoretically, we should be less isolated than at any point in human history. Yet, if you look at the epidemiological and sociological data across North America, Europe, East Asia, it tells a completely different story. We are seeing absolute record levels of self-reported loneliness, social fragmentation, and perceived isolation. It's this hyper-connected loneliness that so many of us just feel in our bones, sitting alone with our devices.
Section 1. The connectivity paradox.
So to understand this massive gap between extreme digital availability and profound human isolation, we really have to look past our own individual habits. We need to examine the environment we're actually operating within. Look, if there is one single thing you take away from this explainer, let it be this. Your loneliness is not an emotional failing. You aren't failing at making friends, and you certainly aren't failing because you haven't mastered the perfect digital detox. What the data actually shows is that these record levels of loneliness are a structural byproduct of digital interface design. The platforms we use every single day are architected in a way that inherently isolates us, even while demanding our constant 24/7 participation. We are participating in a system built purely for engagement, not for genuine connection.
To understand what we've lost, we kind of need to understand what we used to have. The sociologist Ray Oldenburg coined this brilliant term, third places. Think of your home as the first place, and your workplace or school as the second. Third places, those are the physical environments totally distinct from those two. We're talking cafes, community halls, libraries, vibrant public squares. Historically, these spaces were absolutely vital because they provided low-stakes, unpredictable human friction. You might bump into a neighbor, overhear a random debate, or just share a fleeting smile with a total stranger. They forced us to navigate diverse human dynamics, which is honestly how we as a society built genuine social resilience. They were messy, and that was exactly the point. Now, just think about how vacant so many of our urban public spaces have become today.
Let's see what happens when we compare these physical environments directly to our modern digital habitats. Physical third places thrive on unpredictability and diverse human dynamics. Like we said, they're messy. But digital platforms? They optimize for the exact opposite. They are literally designed for frictionless engagement, immense efficiency, and completely predictable feedback loops. This massive transition from the physical town square to the digital feed fundamentally altered the mechanics of how human beings interact. We traded the messy, resilient reality of physical proximity for the smooth, isolated efficiency of the screen.
Section 2. Eradicating social friction.
Now, we usually think of friction as a bad thing, right? Like chafing or being stuck on a terrible customer service call. It's something to be smoothed out. But get this, in the context of human relationships, friction is actually the unsung hero. At the core of every modern digital platform is a single driving imperative, and that is to maximize user retention and engagement. To achieve this, algorithms are meticulously tuned to serve you content that triggers immediate cognitive or emotional responses. But to keep that speed up, the optimization process actively strips away social friction. I'm talking about the awkward pauses in conversation, the unspoken negotiations of eye contact, the unmediated differences of opinion. By eliminating all this friction just to keep you scrolling, platforms inadvertently destroy the very mechanisms that actually build deep social resilience and trust.
This whole eradication of friction ends up isolating us through three very specific mechanisms. First up, parasocial substitution. High-frequency, low-depth interactions, like tapping a little heart icon or leaving a two-word comment, they simulate connection, but they give us absolutely none of the physiological benefits of shared physical presence. It's basically the social equivalent of empty calories. Second, echo chambers and hyper-personalization. Algorithms curate our environments so precisely to our own biases that we actually lose our tolerance for social complexity. It makes real-world interactions feel overwhelming. And third, performative self-presentation. We're heavily incentivized to broadcast these highly curated versions of ourselves just for external validation metrics, views and likes, rather than engaging in vulnerable, reciprocal exchanges. Ultimately, we are replacing real, physical human touch with stylized, isolated network nodes.
Section 3. The psychological toll.
So what exactly happens to us when we live out our days in this frictionless, metric-driven reality? Well, the structural design of these platforms actually begins to cause tangible neurobiological damage. See, human evolutionary history adapted our nervous systems for incredibly rich, multimodal signaling. We evolved to instantly read eye contact, micro-expressions, posture, touch, and even shared acoustic environments. But digital communication takes all of that rich, beautiful signal and compresses it down into low-bandwidth text or choppy video feeds. When your brain tries to parse this low-bandwidth social input over long periods of time, it sparks this intense biological chain reaction. First, you hit cognitive fatigue, simply because the absence of nonverbal cues requires intense conscious processing just to figure out someone's intent. This leads directly to hypervigilance and anxiety. And over time, this chronic, low-level social starvation triggers an elevated cortisol response, totally disrupts your sleep, and leaves you in a persistent state of emotional dysregulation.
And compounding all this biological stress is the sheer illusion of constant availability. Because you can be reached anywhere, at literally any time, across multiple different channels, your brain is forced to carry a perpetual cognitive load. You never truly clock out socially, and this prevents you from entering deep, restorative feats of solitude. We really need to clarify a critical distinction right here. Loneliness is the painful absence of genuine connection. Solitude, on the other hand, is a deeply restorative, absolutely necessary state for self-reflection and emotional consolidation. Digital loneliness represents the absolute worst of both worlds. It is the complete absence of restorative solitude paired with a total failure to achieve genuine human connection.
This actually brings us to a brilliant philosophical concept by Martin Buber that just perfectly captures our modern dilemma. Buber posited that there are two primary modes of engaging with the world. The first is the I-thou relationship. That's where you treat the other person as a whole, completely unique entity, grounded in mutual presence. The second is the I-it relationship, where you're treating the other as an object of utility, maybe a transaction or just for analysis. Digital platforms natively, by their very foundational design, reduce human beings to I-it data points and content creators. We are quite literally degrading our basic human capacity for genuine I-thou encounters.
This whole shift brings some serious philosophical weight with it, and it's perfectly captured by philosopher Byung-Chul Han in his work The Burnout Society. He writes, "Contemporary digital culture replaces external compulsion with internal self-exploitation." Wow. I mean, think about that. We are no longer just victims of the algorithm, we actively internalize its logic. The drive for continuous optimization has totally infected our social lives. We start evaluating our own real-life relationships based on networking efficiency, metrics, and mood management, rather than the intrinsic, immeasurable worth of another human being.
Section 4. Rebuilding shared reality. But listen, we don't have to just accept this as our permanent reality. Because the problem is architectural, the solution must also be architectural. We really have to move beyond this sort of guilt-driven narrative that relies entirely on individual digital detoxes or personal discipline. Deleting an app for a week, that's not going to fix a society-wide infrastructure issue. Addressing digital loneliness demands a comprehensive, ground-up structural redesign of both our physical and our digital worlds.
According to the research, this kind of structural remediation rests on three core pillars. First, a massive reinvestment in physical third places. Municipalities and civic organizations must actively step up and fund non-commercial public infrastructure that actually encourages spontaneous, unscripted human interaction. We need more parks, better libraries, true community centers. Second, human-centered interface design. We need to start demanding software that works for our neurobiology, not against it. And third, digital health literacy. We desperately need educational frameworks that train people to recognize parasocial degradation and to actively prioritize physical, high-bandwidth relationships.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is this. When it comes to the technology itself, software architecture has got to pivot to prioritize depth over frequency. Interface designers need to intentionally reintroduce the friction of deliberate, meaningful communication. What does that actually look like in practice? Well, it looks like asynchronous, long-form messaging where you actually have time to sit and think. It looks like non-metricized social spaces where there are literally no likes or follower counts to dictate your worth. By purposefully bringing friction back, we can finally begin to restore the authentic community depth that our quiet, hyper-efficient interfaces have effectively stolen from us.
We've explored the silent architecture that engineers our isolation today, from the tragic loss of physical third places right down to the neurological exhaustion of our frictionless digital feeds. And while systemic change is definitely necessary, The shift always begins with awareness. So I want to leave you with this question to really chew on. How can you intentionally reintroduce friction into your own life to reclaim that deep community depth from these quiet interfaces? Where specifically can you trade a stylized network node for a moment of genuine human touch this week? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.